Hi everyone, welcome back for another video. Are you thinking about becoming a landlord? Well, if you are, I will share with you a little bit about my experiences as a buy-to-let landlord. So if you want to know more, then stay tuned. All right, so how did I get started in investing in buy-to-let? Well, it was somewhat accidental, somewhat deliberate, if you might think about it in that way. I purchased a property in 2008 or 2007, something like that. And when I met my then boyfriend and then later on became my husband, we were planning to buy a home together, and he already had a property himself. And so when we were thinking about buying a home together, we decided rather than sell that home and use that equity to, basically put down a really big down payment on our marital home, we decided instead to release equity from the two properties that we had and then go and buy our marital home. Now, why did we do this? Well, we wanted to make sure that we had some additional layer of financial cushion. At the time, interest rates were very, very low. Sub 1% you're looking at for quite a lot of mortgages where you had 40% equity. And we wanted to find a way of kind of building towards our future and creating a nest egg, and also providing like a bit of a financial cushion in the event something happened, and also to get a little bit of extra income through rent. So it meant that we became landlords of two properties that we had previously lived in. For us at the time, it made sense. Now, fast forward to 2021, things are vastly different. So first of all, you have tax changes that came into force under George Osborne. Essentially what happened was that there were additional tax liabilities that applied to buy-to-let properties. So if you had purchased them in your own individual name, as we had done, we owned them as homes that we had before we met each other, that meant that these new tax changes applied to me. So what were the tax changes? First of all, there was a phasing out of tax relief. So in the past, you could claim mortgage interest relief. Let's say the rental that you received on a property would be about £1,000. And let's say, for simplicity, your mortgage payments were £500. That meant that the profit essentially was £500. And with a £500 profit, then you would pay tax based on your personal tax rate. But with all those tax changes, it then means that you are taxed on income rather than profit. You are not allowed to claim mortgage interest relief, which actually makes it unprofitable in some cases to be a landlord. Then you also had stamp duty come into force. So basically where you would have paid stamp duty at the same rate as everybody else, there were additional stamp duty rates applied. Then you had capital gains. So you'll pay capital gains when you sell a property or an asset. And then plus the additional stress test that mortgage lenders apply made it very difficult for you to then go on and buy additional properties. So all of these things kind of impact the profitability that you would calculate on a buy-to-let property. Now, for me personally, because of the interest rate increases and the changes to tax, it's made buy-to-let not a very attractive proposition. In the past, you used to pay tax on the profit that you made from a buy-to-let property. So you could exclude, or there were expenses that you were allowed to claim, such as wear and tear, I think it was about 10%. You could claim for mortgage interest relief and various other things, but now you can't claim for those things. So now there are a various range of allowable expenses that you were allowed, and then you were given a 20% tax relief after you have applied all your allowable expenses. I personally let my accountant do all that, and I think most people should too. Some people don't want to pay the £250 it costs for an accountant to do that work for you. But for me, it's like peace of mind, and also I get to actually talk to an accountant rather than trying to work it out myself and getting myself into a whole world of problems. But if you don't want to pay an accountant, then you will have to do that extra work yourself. I personally don't have the time nor interest in actually trying to work out what the allowable expenses are. I let an expert do that for me. So in some years, you can actually make a loss. And the reason is that obviously mortgage interest takes up the vast majority of expenses for most landlords. Now, the thing with buy-to-let is that you're borrowing against an asset that has a certain defined value at the time at which you take the mortgage. So when interest rates were low, it made it very attractive. But when interest rates rise, it eats into your profit. And you might find that you end up only breaking even, or in some cases making a loss. Most mortgages, most lenders will stress test the mortgage. So they will do a stress test against the rental income, normally of about 125% to 150%. So it basically means that your rental income must be 125% or 150% of the mortgage payments. And that will basically tell you the minimum amount of rent that you need to collect in order to pass the stress test of this mortgage. In the early days, I did actually make some profit. And then now that tax things have changed, I actually don't make much of a profit. You might have seen in the news that there's a lot of landlords selling up, and that's obviously making the rental market shrink. And invariably, supply and demand means that rental incomes for those landlords that are still in the buy-to-let game go up. Then you also had Section 21, which makes it harder for you to evict a tenant. So if you've got a tenant that just will not pay, and I have seen some nightmare stories where tenants will not pay for their rent, and then the landlord is kind of left having to cover the cost of mortgage payments for months and months and months, sometimes even years. Now, the only advantage to me of keeping the buy-to-lets is the capital appreciation. We're fortunate enough to have bought nearly 10 years ago now and have benefited from the capital appreciation. So, and even though we are just about breaking even, and in some years, as I said, we have made a loss, it's actually worth it to us to keep hold of it because number one, as we are thinking about retirement, it's another source of income. Then also for our children, if we die before our children, then it becomes part of our estate and therefore they can benefit from that. We don't intend to sell because just don't want to be stung by capital gains tax. If you are thinking about becoming a buy-to-let landlord, there's a couple of things that you should be aware of. Number one is how profitable is this property going to be? So there's something called yield or rental yield that you'll need to work out. And this is basically a calculation of the total cost of the asset to buy divided by the rental income that you are expected to get. And for me at the moment, having bought those properties 10 years ago, we are looking at a yield of about 3%. Now, if you think about 3% against some of the savings account, like these cash savings accounts that you can get at about 5%, well, 3 versus 5 makes it not exactly the most attractive choice. And also, if you invest in the stock market, you could be seeing returns of between 5, 10, sometimes even 20%. So it's just something to think about in terms of calculating what is a profitable venture and what isn't. Now, I know there are some landlords who are choosing to buy in the north. Our properties happen to be in London, and that is also impacting the ability to make this an attractive proposition for us if we were to decide to buy additional properties and even to hold on to what we have. In the north, clearly properties are a lot cheaper, and if you have a bigger deposit as a landlord, then you can make a greater amount of profit. And another way that people are making a profit through buy-to-let is by buying them under limited companies. Now, something to be aware of about limited companies, and I'll do a different video about this, is that you might actually not end up being more profitable buying them under a limited company structure than you would if you were to buy it as an individual. And that's for various reasons, which I'll go into in a different video. But that's it essentially. That has been my experience of buy-to-let. Why I wouldn't necessarily recommend it as a choice for investment, particularly if you hold them under your own name, and also how and why I got into buy-to-let in the first place. I hope this video has been helpful to those of you who might be interested. If you have any further questions, leave them in the comment box and I will try to reply. Thanks for watching. Bye.